Thank you very much for coming here. Thank you for Debug and the Israel Embassy to bring me here. And let's start the talk because we have a lot of things that I want to talk with you. The basic of the internet wasn't created for regular website like you are using today. Think about maybe one of the basic things that you are using in CSS these days, like the CSS layout module of CSS Flexbox. CSS Flexbox, one of the basic things to use layout on website, only being finalized and supported in all the web browsers only in the year of 2015. And until now, we have a lot of things that didn't create it in the correct way, like to support different type of languages. The main thing that we are doing website is reading text, content. And until now, if you wanted to create a multi-language website that's supporting different type of languages, like languages that are going from left to right, like English and Croatian, and like to create a support for different other type of languages that are going from right to left, like Hebrew and Arabic, you needed to create two different style sheets for the same website. But now CSS logical properties are here to solve this problem. But not only this problem, because we have even more special languages in the world. We have all the Far East languages that can be even written from top to bottom. But before we will jump to the new logical properties themselves, you need to understand how websites are working, or more precisely, to understand the world of axis that we have in every one of our websites. Every website is created from two axes. The main axis, which is called the block axis, is talking about the main flow of the website. By default, as you already know, websites are going from top to bottom. And you will ask me, isn't it always going in this way? And the answer that it isn't. The second axis is the way that we are reading the text. By default, we are working according to the English language that is going from left to right, and this is called the inline axis. But something very special is happening in traditional languages in the Far East. The text is written from top to bottom. And you maybe think that maybe the only thing that is changing here is that the inline axis is being rotated 90 degrees to the right. But this is only half of the truth, because a traditional Japanese website is like to take a fully English website and rotate all of it 90 degrees to the right. Huh. And now the header of the website is in the right side. The footer of the website is far in the left. Instead of vertical scroll, we now have an horizontal scroll. And in this type of languages, the text is, of course, written in a vertical direction. That you will imagine that, you need to see a live example for that. This is an example for traditional Chinese website, how it can look like. And as you can see here, the header is in the right. Paragraph, images, paragraph, images, paragraph, images, paragraph. And instead of vertical scroll, we now have an horizontal scroll. Interesting. Okay, after we understand that we have these two axes, we need to know how to control them. To control the block axis, we have the writing mode property. Its default value is horizontal TB, meaning top to bottom. And the main thing that I want you to read in the value is the last two letters, the TB, the top to bottom. This is the default of all the website. The second word is horizontal, talking about the text direction. But every time that websites are going from top to bottom, the text will be in a horizontal direction. It doesn't say if it's left to right or right to left. It's just saying that the text is being written in a horizontal direction. To support special languages in the Far East, we have the new value of vertical RL, meaning right to left. And now the website is going instead from top to bottom, now it's going from the right side of the screen to the left side of the screen. The header is in the right, the footer is far, far in the left. Instead of vertical scroll, we now have an horizontal scroll, and in those type of language, the text is being written in a vertical direction. But we have even more special languages in the Far East. One of the traditional Mongolian is written in the vertical direction, but is reading in the opposite direction. And because of that, we have another value which is called vertical LR, meaning left to right. And now the header of the website is in the left side. The footer is far in the right. Instead of vertical scroll, again, we have an horizontal scroll, but now it's starting in the left side of the screen. And yes, in those type of languages, again, the text is being written in a vertical direction. To control the inline axis, you maybe already know this property. This is the direction property. But until now, you didn't know that this property is controlling the inline axis. And there isn't anything new with this property. It has its two values, LTR for all the left-to-right languages and RTL for all the right-to-left languages like Hebrew and Arabic. To recap it, because it's very important, to control the block axis, we have the writing mode property with its three main values, one that is going from top to bottom, one that is going from left to right, and one that is going from right to left. To control the inline axis, we have the direction property with its two main values, left to right for left to right languages and RTL for right to left languages. And we are talking about a new world, the new logical properties world. But until now, we have been living in an old world, and we never gave it any name. Before I will jump to those new CSS logical properties, let's understand in what world we have been living until now. The old world that we have been using in the web was the physical world, and because of that, we have physical properties. Think about it. The margin property, you have margin top, margin bottom, margin left, and margin right. All of these directions are physical direction. But in a logical world, we no longer have top, bottom, left, and right. And instead, we need new logical direction. And because we have these both axes, the block axis and the inline axis, now this logical direction are working according to those both axes, the block axis and the inline axis. And because by default, top and bottom sitting on the block axis, top represent the start of the block axis, and because of that, top will update into block start. The bottom represent the end of the block axis. Because of that, bottom will update into block end, and we're starting to read the English from the left side of the screen. And the left and right are in the inline axis. And if left is representing the start, left will be updated into inline start, and right will be updated into inline end. But what is very special in this diagram, that this diagram is not a fixed diagram. This diagram can change according to the type of the language. For example, as we saw in the traditional Japanese and Chinese, all this diagram is being rotated. And now the header of the website is in the right side. The bottom of the website is the left side. And instead of reading the text from left to right, we are now reading the text from top to bottom. And this creates us a new world, a new matrix world. Think about it. The top doesn't need to be all the time top anymore. And yes, it's for supporting different type of languages, but maybe you can create with it other things. Maybe to create a website in English or in Croatia, that instead of going from top to bottom, why not to create a website that is going from left side to the right side with a lot of box of content? Think about it. And now let's jump to the logical properties themselves. As I told you, we no longer have top, bottom, left, and right, and they need to be updated according to the logical axis. Because top and bottom sit by default on the block axis, top represents the start of the block axis. Every top will be updated into block start, every bottom into block end. In the inline axis, in the axis of the text, we're starting to read English from the left side, and because of that, left will be updated into inline start, and right will be updated into inline end. And in this way, I'm just updating all the properties of CSS box model. All of them are changing now to the new logical direction. And as you can see here, let's take one example, padding bottom. Top, bottom, vertical axis, the block axis. Bottom represent the end of the block axis. Padding bottom will update into padding blocked end. And what about width and height? In a logical world, if you're thinking about it, we no longer have width and height. Because when something is width, if we are rotating the screen, it will be height. And the opposite is correct as well. And because of that, we have the new size property. Because width, by default, sitting on the inline axis, we now have a new property which called inline size. Height, by default, sitting on the block axis, we have a new property in CSS which called block size. And all the minimum, maximum, width, and height are updating as well. And this creates us kind of a new CSS box model. Think about it. All the properties has been changed. And I can assume that between 2 to 4 years from now, we will stop using totally this old box model. Because if you will work in this way, you have multi-language support even if you don't need it right now. You create the code one time correct, and it can support all the different type of languages that you need. But we have a lot of other properties that need to be updated, like the CSS positions. In CSS position, if we want to put something in the top left corner, we will give it position fixed, top 0 and left 0. And now all those properties of top, bottom, left, and right need to be updated to the new properties. And as you can see here, expect the logical direction, we have the insert prefix in the beginning. And you may think, why we need this long name of properties? But let's talk about why we got the insert prefix in the beginning. In the past, if you didn't know, you can do it. If you want to create an element that is covering the entire screen, you can give it position fixed, top 0, bottom 0, left 0, and right 0. And in this way, you are covering the entire screen. And you may think that now we need to do it in this way, position fixed and 4 logical direction property and very long names. But have you ever asked yourself, why in properties like margin, I can write margin right, margin bottom, margin left, and margin top. But if I want to use all of them, I can write margin with 4 values. But with CSS positions, we couldn't do it because there isn't anything that connects all these 4 properties. But now, we can fix the problem of the past because now we have the insert prefix. And now you can write a vertical axis according to the new logical direction, insert block that will equal to insert block start and insert block end, insert inline that equals to the insert inline start and insert end. And if the both values are the same, you can write 1 values. But if all the 4 values are the same, instead of writing this long thing or this long thing, you can do it in this way. Position fixed and insert with 1 value at 0, and that's it. And I think that there is a lot of good things that are coming with logical properties. Some of them is to solving the problem that we have in the past in CSS. And I really love to see all those new changes. But we have even more properties that need to be updated. The old value of the text align property, left and right, are updating to new values of start and end. The old values of the float property, left and right, now have new values of inline start and inline end. The resize property, if you don't know what is the resize property, you have it by default on text area input HTML that you can resize or only horizontal or only vertical. But in a logical world, we no longer have an horizontal and vertical direction. Think about it. When something is horizontal direction, in another type of language, it will be vertical, and the opposite is correct as well. Because horizontal by default sitting on the inline axis, we have a new value of inline. Because vertical is sitting by default on the block axis, we have a new value of block. And we can assume that everything that has physical direction will be updated into the new logical direction. Everything with properties and direction of top, bottom, left, and right, horizontal and vertical, and maybe even X and Y axis. In this way, you will have you can choose between those 2 properties, or logical properties, or physical properties. And what about CSS Flexbox and CSS Grid? When I was starting to learn logical properties, I was really afraid in the beginning, but what if we now have a lot of other changes in these big, huge 2 CSS modules? But if you are thinking about it, CSS Flexbox, for example, it never had physical direction. All the alignment properties are already built with logical thinking, with values of flex start and flex end. And it means that you can use CSS Flexbox in the same way, and you don't need to update anything in your own thinking. And what about CSS Grid? The same. CSS Grid is already built with logical direction and logical thinking, and you can now use this both model in the same way, and you don't need to update anything when you are creating a logical website. And now let's talk about what web developers are afraid the most. How to start work with it. Maybe it's so complicated. I want to show you that it's even simple to update an old code of website to a new logical code of CSS. You don't believe me? Let's do it together. We have this code that is built with physical direction. And we know that this code is for an English or Croatian website that is going from left to right. And now we need to update all those physical properties to the new logical one. Let's take the first one, max width. We no longer have width property, and we know that we have the new size property. Width is sitting on the inline axis. Instead of max width, we will have max inline size. Margin left, margin right, again inline axis. Left represents the start of the block axis. Margin left will be updated into margin inline start, and margin right will be updated into margin inline end. And let's take the last one, margin bottom. top, bottom, block axis, bottom, the end of the block axis. In this way, I'm just updating all the properties from physical one to the new logical one. And when you will refresh the screen, you will be a little bit afraid. You know why? Because your brain is working in a way that when you're doing a lot of changes, you expect to get a new result. And here we've done a lot of changes, and we will refresh the screen, and nothing is changed. But think about it. What does it matter? If we are creating a website for an English website, what does it matter if it's written with physical properties or logical properties? A website in English needs to look like a website in English. Okay, then. Then how now we can support all the other type of languages that we talk about them? If you are thinking about that, I already teach you that in the beginning of this talk, on how to control the inline axis and the block axis. And the only thing that you need to do right now is to use one of these property. For English, you don't need to do anything because this is the default. On the HTML element, you have by default direction LTR. For Hebrew and Arabic, the only thing that you need to put on the HTML element, the direction property with the value of RTL. To support traditional Japanese website, you can use the writing mode with the value of vertical RL on the HTML element instead of the direction. And for traditional Mongolian, you can use the writing mode property with the value of vertical LR. And that's it. You need to understand what we achieve here. In the past, if I wanted to create a website that's supporting English, Croatian, and Hebrew and Arabic that are going from the right to left side, I need to create two different style sheets for the same website. Two different code for the same website to support different type of languages. But now, with the same CSS, I can support all the different type of languages that are existing in the world, and this is amazing. For you to believe me that it's so easy, I wanted to test it out in the beginning, and I created my first CodePen for this example. And as you can see here, all the properties are logical properties. Everything are built here with logical properties, and I have here a drop-down. And when I will change the language from English to Japanese, the only thing that it does with some little bit of JavaScript code is putting on the HTML element the writing mode property with the value of vertical RL, and all the property will be updated according to the writing mode. Let's click it. And the website is being rotated. And now it's supporting traditional languages for the Far East. And as you can see here, instead of vertical scroll, we now have a horizontal scroll. So easy to use. Just we need to change one property, and that's it. But we need to talk about some issues because logical properties is changing a lot of stuff in CSS. And let's talk about those issues. Shortened in CSS. When you are using shortened like the margin and padding shortened, the browser cannot know if you want to work with physical direction or with logical direction. And because it cannot know if physical properties have been here first, it will always understand it according to the physical direction, meaning margin top, margin right, margin bottom, and margin left. And if now you want to create a logical website, you need to write 4 separated properties. And yes, this is not so nice. And the W3C thinking about how to solve this specific problem, and they are thinking about to create a new CSS called keyword, which is called logical. And if you want to create a shorthand that will work according to the logical direction, you can put the logical keyword, and in this way the browser will know if you want to work with logical direction. In this example, it will understand that it will need to be margin block start, margin inline end, margin block end, and margin inline start. But still, you need to remember that this code is not working. But because when I was starting to learn logical properties in the end of the year of 2018, I thought to myself, maybe we need another solution because I don't want to write this keyword in every one of my shorthands. Maybe it's good if you need to change 3 shorthands. And because of that, I thought maybe I need to create my own solution. And I added to the W3C suggestion. I think that we need a new property in CSS. We will call it flow mode. By default, it will have the physical value. In this way, all the older websites in the world still working in the same way. But if we now want to create a logical website, we can use this property with a new keyword of logical, and it will affect all the shorthands in the website. In this way, I don't need to write the logical keyword in every place. And I really suggested it to the W3C on GitHub. And if you like this idea, you can upvote me a VI here. But you need to remember that You cannot work still with any type of shorthands, not the two solution. If you now want to work with logical properties, the only way that you can do it, it's like with the 4 separated properties. The second issue is for responsive design. I love responsive design. And from the beginning, I understand one basic thing when I wanted to create my example that you saw on CodePen, that I'm changing the dropdown from English to Japanese. I wanted this example to be fully responsive design. And I thought to myself, websites that are going from left to right and websites that are going from right to left, the responsiveness need to be according to the width of the screen. But this, you already know. But what will happen in traditional Chinese and traditional Japanese? If the website is being rotated 90 degrees to the right, the responsiveness needs to be according to the height. I thought to myself, very easy. Instead of using media query of max width, I will use a media query of max inline size. That's it, problem is solved. But this media query is not working. And you maybe think that this is a reason why not to use CSS logical properties, but you need to understand that 99.99% from all the languages that are existing in the world are languages that are going from left to right or right to left. And both of them are working according to the width of the screen. And because of that, you can still use logical properties even today. And you may ask me, but what about Japanese and Chinese languages? You need to remember that Japanese and Chinese regular languages working different from traditional languages, the old languages of China and Japan. Regular Chinese and regular Japanese is working the same way. They are working according to the left to right languages. And because of that, this is not a reason why not to use logical properties. And yes, we need this feature to support even the 0.01%. But for now, we still don't have it. And let's talk about the browser support. Surprisingly, all the main features, almost, are being supported in all the main browsers. All the box model properties, the logical one, all the new size properties, the new values of text align, and even the inset property for CSS positions, all of them are supported in all the new browsers that are being updated. The last one just being updated in the last Safari version, and this is a really good news. But we have some small bad news, because the new values of the float property and the resize properties are updated only in Firefox. But this is a minor things, and you can maybe manage without. And yes, we need this feature, even floats, if you think about it, why we need CSS floats in 2021. If I want to float an image and put already text, this is the only way. And yes, we can maybe manage without, because we are getting a lot of other powers that we can earn. And I hope that we will see this small feature very soon. And before we finish, my friends, if you want to dig more to logical properties, you can read my article, Logical Properties. And this is another one of small minor things that I think that we need in CSS logical properties. And my friend, I was Elad Shechter. If you want to see more CSS stuff that I'm creating, you can find me in those social networks. And I want to say thank you very much for the Debug conferences and to the Israel Embassy in Croatia that bring me here. And my friends, thank you very much for listening.